All right, welcome everybody. We are now doing our connecting sermon for the 10 ings to beat the devil. And if you weren't with us last week, we talked about remembering and how what we remember is crucial to our story, to who we are, and also to recognizing the faithfulness of God, what He's brought us through, so that we can face what we're facing, what the future holds. And today we want to kind of continue on that as we form our own story around our journey and what God is doing in our lives, what He wants to do in our lives, what He longs to do in our lives. And so I invite you to turn in your Bible to John 15. That will be our foundational passage for this morning. And I don't know about you, but during this pandemic, I do feel a little out of sorts. And I recognize there are some things about this pandemic that I really do like, some positives. It's nice to be with the family so much more. It's nice to have time together. It's nice to be able to get outside. I don't think I appreciated the outdoors quite as much until I was told to stay inside. It's something about human nature that you tell me I have to be inside, then I want to be outside. And I've really enjoyed this spring, being outside, seeing the blooming trees and flowers and grass and going on walks and things like that. And that's been a blessing. But I also feel a little off at times. And it's just a little disconcerting not to do the things I'm used to, especially as a pastor. There's a lot of meetings and gatherings. And of course, this service right now should be at our church, and we should be able to be together and worship together. And I should be able to hear the babies crying and the amens and the rustle of people in the pews. And so it's a little disconcerting just preaching to a screen, even though I can see you. And I appreciate the bravery for those of you that put your cameras on for this worship service. It's commendable. We're gonna talk about courage at the end of the sermon, so I'll give you some props here at the beginning. But one of the things I decided to do to help pass not just the time, but also to give my mind something new to focus on is something I've noticed that a lot of us are doing during this time. And I picked a project, and I call it my Corona project. And for me, my Corona project involves finishing the basement. And the basement has some things that we had put in kind of halfway. And now I want to add some decorative elements and some trim and build a little bit into the basement just to kind of finish it to where I would like it to be. And so this week I braved the virus and went out to Home Depot. And if you're anything like me and you start a project, it's never just one trip to Home Depot. It's like go to Home Depot, recognize, oh, I need another piece, back to Home Depot. And so this week I was back and forth from Home Depot, which is the closest one to my house. And I got all the wood. I had designed what I wanted to build and how I wanted to build it. And I got all the wood, which is no easy task. And I had to take the SUV to fit in, and even the piece of plywood that I needed, the big 4x8 sheets. It's a little tough to fit even in our Honda Pilot. But I managed, and that was one of the achievements of my week, to get all the lumber and the plywood and get it home. And I was so excited. I started measuring, I started cutting, and then I realized I forgot the screws. No screws to put it all together, just the cut pieces of wood and the plywood. And I jokingly said to Jake, I said, Jake, I forgot the screws. I can't build anything. I've got all the wood, but I can't do anything without the screws. I said, I'm sure there's a spiritual lesson in there somewhere. And I'm sure there is. So now I'm telling it. So there must be a spiritual lesson. And I'll let you figure out what it is. No, actually, it hit me that the spiritual lesson is perfect for the sermon today, because I'm talking about connecting. And the screws are what connect the pieces of lumber together to make something beautiful, to make something bigger and better than the wood could be on its own. One little piece of wood that might be absolutely crucial in the design of something bigger on its own without the screws can't do much and probably can't make much. But the piece that I'm designing, which is a secret, by the way, from my family, so that's why I'm not telling you what I'm designing. But anyway, what I'm designing needs every piece. And every piece is cut to the right measurement to perform its specific place to make the whole. And I think it's like that for us as humans. I think we're all supposed to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And there's something absolutely fulfilling when we find our place. You know, Paul talked about it when he said we're all part of the body of Christ. And each of us is a different part of the body, but we're all needed. The eye can't say to the ear, I don't need you, you're not important. The ear can't say to the foot, hey, you're wasted. The ear is so much better. We don't need you. No, we need every part of the body. And all of us are a part of that. And it's more than just a cute metaphor. It is crucial to our emotional well-being that we feel that we are part of something bigger, than ourselves that matters, that has significance, that has meaning, that is beautiful. And so I want to take a look at Jesus' words in John chapter 15, and I'm going to try to share my screen here. We'll see if we can look at a few things that I have put together for us this morning. All right. In John chapter 15, we read this famous analogy of Jesus. I am the vine, verse 1, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. Now that's a whole sermon in itself, but I'll have to resist the temptation to preach on that. You are already clean because of the word I've spoken to you. Remain in me, or some versions say, abide in me, and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain or abide in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If a man remains in me, and I in him, he will bear much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. And when you look at Jesus' metaphor here of the vine and the branches, you can see that a vine has many branches. And each of these branches comes in different widths and lengths, and they ultimately lead to the goal, which is to produce fruit. But we all know from the physical world the reality that if one of these branches gets cut off from the vine, disconnected, that it can no longer grow. It can no longer bear fruit. And if you cut one off and you watch it, it will die. It will wither, fade, and it becomes brittle and hard. And as Jesus would later say in John 15, it's only good at that point for firewood. We are the branches. That's the words of Jesus. What does he mean by that? What is he trying to teach us? Is it an egotistical concept that Jesus thinks he's so important, he needs to be the center, and so he wants to show that he's the best and we're the least? Not at all. Jesus is telling us something about our nature. He's telling us something about how we're happiest. He's telling us something about how we can be healthy, how we can be fulfilled. When I look around the world today, I see a lot of disconnected branches. And just as a disconnected branch withers, fades, eventually dies, so also with humans. There are so many people that are hurting, that feel withered, that feel shrunken, that do not have a source for life, health, joy. And they cannot bear fruit in the way that they were meant to thrive. Jesus is letting you know that you actually can be and should be connected to God. And that is the first and most important point in today's sermon, that we were built, designed for connection to God. Our life only works best when we are connected to the divine, when we are connected to the one who is the source of all life, all creation, the source of this universe. He brought all things into existence. We come from him, and we do not operate well when we're separated from him. In fact, it is indeed our spirituality as Christians that gives us a huge advantage with things like loneliness, isolation, being marginalized. All of these are significant hits to our social well-being, to our emotional health. And we live in a world where people have gotten disconnected, where they do not see the value of the spirituality, of being connected to God. Now, the second point to this is, if the branches are connected to the vine, then we're all ultimately connected to each other. We're all part of the same tree. We're all part of the same vine. We're all part of the same family. We're all part of one big, wonderful, beautiful organism. And we all have a part to play in growing the beautiful fruit. And so this, by definition, connects us to each other. And that's beautiful too. In fact, I was just listening to a podcast and I heard Dr. Vivek Murthy speak. And Vivek was talking about his new book called Together, which I haven't read, but I've heard him in this interview talking about it. And it was a powerful conversation, and I'm sure it's a powerful book, called Together, the healing power of what? Human connection. Now, what you need to know about Dr. Murthy is he is one of the foremost experts on health in our entire country, a Harvard graduate, and he was the 19th Surgeon General in the United States of America. He served from 2014 to 2017. And he said while he was serving as the Surgeon General of the United States of America, he decided to travel across the country and talk to people about their health. And he would ask them, what do we need to do in America to help our population be healthy? What do you need from me? What do you need from our government? What should we be putting our money in? What should we invest this money that we have as a country into making our people healthy and happy and productive to help them thrive? And he was rather surprised as he traveled the country. He said one theme kept just coming up as he would ask questions. Story after story after story would come up around the concept of loneliness. That people were hurting because they were lonely. And not only that, people were sick, physically sick. And it all stemmed back to loneliness, to feeling isolated, to not having those connections. And this was powerful, and this was life-changing for him, because he said in medicine, he had been trained to treat the body. He had been trained that you need drugs, that there's medicines that can help, that if there's a problem, you got to do more research, figure out the right medicine, give the right medicine. But he said, who was looking at loneliness. And he said, yet every disease and everything that he was discovering and talking to people about, and especially he said those things that affect us as society. And he said things like heart disease, things like addiction, things like the opioid crisis. As he was studying these and talking to people, it all kept coming back to this loneliness, to this isolation, to this sense of disconnection that people are feeling. And he felt it was terribly and adversely affecting our country and our society. And so he started studying this more, and he said there's 3 dimensions of loneliness, or you can break it into 3 categories. And I want you to think about this in your own life. Number 1, we crave an intimate relationship, a longing for a close, confident, or an intimate partner. Now, often we find this in marriage, but it doesn't have to be in marriage. We might say that we have our BFF, and the BFF is important, and even kids in school will talk about and try to find their best friend. And it's just something innate to us that we crave that one person that we can trust, that we can go to, that one person that has our back, that one person that we can feel safe with. And so that's a key part of our loneliness. That's a key part to understanding connection, because if we don't have that piece, then that's a missing piece and we will feel lonely. Even if we have the other 2 pieces, this is a natural longing. And you remember in Genesis chapter 2, when God created Adam and Eve, he said, a man will leave his mother and father and he will be united to his wife and they become one flesh. And it's this concept of just that closeness with that one person. And for many of us, we feel like if we just have that one person, then everything's okay. That person we're safe with, that person that loves us in spite of who we are, not because of who we are. That person that knows us at our worst and still loves us. That's a hard person to find, by the way. But hopefully we found someone who will make that commitment to us and we will be that person to someone else. And that person can be a friend, it could be a spouse, it might even be a relative or a mentor. But we need that person. The second category, he said, is social, the social or relational dimension. This is that yearning for quality friendships, for social companionship. Who's your posse? Who's your gang? Who's your friends? Who's your amigos? You know, who are the people that you like to hang out with? Who's your support system? For some of us, that needs to be a lot of people. For some of us, that can be just a handful of people. And there's no right or wrong to any of it. It's just, who is that? Where's that place where I feel like I can belong? It could be at work, or work might be the opposite of that for you. It could be church. In fact, when I look at this 3 dimensions, I feel like church has a huge value that we can offer to our community, to our neighbors, to our friends, to our families. And that brings us to the third one, which is the collective. We hunger for a network or a community of people who share our interests and our purpose. That we can be part of something with a shared value, a shared purpose. And we're not quite happy until we are in such a community. Now, more and more today, people are not looking to church as that community. I think that was kind of a default community back in the day. But now more than ever, church is not the place that people are looking for that sense of shared value and purpose. And I think we're raising a generation of people without church. And there's no wonder that as Dr. Murthy traveled across the country, he was seeing more and more loneliness, because I'm not sure that there's many other organizations or communities that are filling the place that church once took. In fact, what I want to suggest to you is church has a vital role to play in this. that we have a ministry of just getting to know and inviting people to join our community. Now, this has implications for us at church because we have to be a safe place to invite people to come. It would be absolutely pointless and counterproductive if we invite our neighbors, if we invite the people of our community, and then when they come, we are not a safe place, that we're a place of judgment or a place of fear or we're a place where we tell them they're not good enough unless they believe exactly like us or think exactly like us. It has to be a place of welcome, a place of acceptance. And does that mean we have to compromise our values? Absolutely not. It means our core value has to be the same core value of Jesus, which is all men will know you're my disciples by your love. Love has to be the hallmark. It has to be the foundation of church. And so it has to be a place where people come, and when they walk through our doors, or in this case, when they join our Zoom meeting, they feel loved. They feel like they're part of something bigger, part of something better. They feel like they are welcome, accepted, and part of the community. I remember one book I read said that we need to be a Lego church. And what does that mean? What does it mean to be a Lego church? He says, well, when you look at Legos, and I should have brought some, they each have little circles on them, right? And what is the purpose of those little circles on the Legos? The purpose of those little circles is to connect. The little circles allow you to connect one Lego to another Lego. And just like humans, each Lego has different amount of circles. Each Lego has different connection points. And I think some humans have a lot of connection points. Some extroverts, like my wife and others, they can connect to a lot of people and they love having lots of friends and keeping in touch with lots of friends. Some of us don't have quite as many connections or quite as many circles, but we still have some. Now, the danger in church is that we fill up all of our circles. And if you go to a church where everybody's circle is connected to everybody else and there's no extra circles, then when visitors or guests come, there's no place for them to connect. And so it's important that each of us, and this includes everyone, this is not the job of the pastor, this is not the job of just the elders, this is the job of every person in church. This is a calling. I want to impress this upon you. You are called no matter who you are. And you might say, well, I don't feel connected at church. Well, then go connect to someone. And if you see someone new, you reach out to them. Because all of us are called by Christ to show that love, to share his love. And by the way, Christ, if you want to use the Lego metaphor, is that huge green base. At least when I was a child, it was this big green base that you built the house on. And it was huge and it had, 60, 100 connections. And you could build all these things on top of it. It's the platform. And so we build on Christ, and he has unlimited connections. And so we all build on that and we become connected and we can build something beautiful together through these connections. And that is a ministry, that is a gift. That is something that is essential to the health of our society. And we can offer that through our church. Dr. Murthy has this to say. He says, one of the most important factors in preventing and addressing toxic stress in children is social connection. While a traumatic past may increase our risk of bad things happening, we are not destined to crash and burn. Adversity doesn't mean that we are destroyed. Emmy Warner, who did a bunch of research in the 50s, showed that we can rescue one another. In her research, she studied children who had been through traumatic experiences. And one thing she found is that the social connection determined whether the child could recover from the adversity. whether the child could become a healthy, fully functioning adult, depended not on certain medicines, not on certain techniques, not on them just doing independent therapy. Those things might have some value. What she found in her research is that it was the social connections they developed after their trauma that brought the healing. And so Dr. Murthy, recognizing this research, says it showed that we can rescue one another. It is within our relationships with one another that we all find healing and a better path forward. Now, can you believe that this is coming from a Harvard doctor, Surgeon General of the United States of America, who, when he studied what brings the most healing, it's not the medicines, it's not the hospital, it's not the spa, it's finding healthy relationships, finding connection that starts to bring our healing in all aspects. And I only want to bring this out and emphasize it because I think it's a little counterintuitive. I think sometimes when we feel bad, we think, okay, well, maybe I need to find out what's going on. I need to go to the doctor. Maybe I need to, change my diet a little, which could be good. I need to take these medicines. And we end up doing all these things independently. We do all these things to fix ourselves. And maybe the healing is destined and designed to come in relationship. Maybe the first thing we should say is, hey, am I feeling lonely? Do I feel disconnected? And by the way, loneliness can come when you have tons of people around you. Loneliness can come even when you seem to have lots of friends or you have a church family. You can be lonely in a crowd, and we all have been there. It's about the quality of your relationships, and it's also about this next thing. Let me talk about Brené Brown and her research. She's another leading researcher. You may have heard some of her TED Talks. She's written like a ton of books now. She just started a podcast, which I highly recommend, and I listened to this week and was so inspired. She has a podcast called Unlocking Us. Just awesome stuff that she's doing. And so she says there's 3 factors that would hinder connection. Number 1, fear. What will people think? What if they don't like me? What will they say? Maybe I'm not good enough for them. Maybe if I show up as my true self, they won't like me. Maybe they'll reject me. Maybe I'm not as clever or smart or funny, or I don't make as much money. I'm not as good as they are. So this fear prevents us. Or maybe they're just too busy, or they don't really want more friends, or whatever it may be. Maybe the church will judge me. I don't want to go to church. Maybe the small group will make me talk. There's all these fears. And by the way, spiritually speaking, and from the Bible, who is the author of fear? Who is putting those fears in your head? The devil runs the world by fear. That's how his kingdom runs. And unless you want to join his kingdom, unless you think it's the better way to go, I suggest you have to find a way to deal with fear, and you cannot listen to his lies. His lies are always rooted in fear. And if you're going to let those lies run your life, you're going to end up where the devil wants you, which is disconnected from the vine, withering, failing, dying. And I don't mean that as a judgment. I'm just trying to tell you the truth. The second thing she puts is shame, and shame has to do with fear, of course. Shame, Dr. Brené Brown has done I think she did her whole doctorate on this thing called shame, which is a fascinating, I encourage you to read her books. She's written whole books on it. I certainly can't cover the topic thoroughly in this few minutes that I have, but I would just say that shame is that feeling that I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I don't always do things right. I'm not always at my best, and I don't want people to see me when I'm not at my best. It's not okay. And so we carry this shame, and you hear it in little ways in our conversations, like, oh, I would love to have you over, but you should see my house right now. It's terrible. I would love to do that, but I'm not really good. I would love to join the choir, but I don't sing well. I would love to, but I can't, I can't. Shame is always I can't because I'm not good enough. And so we don't connect with others. We hide from others. We withdraw from others because we only want them to see our best. And we live in a country where we have so many ways to connect now through social media, Instagram, Facebook, and Snapchat, and all these kind of things. But what research shows is that instead of building our sense of connection, these things actually tear down our sense of connection. And you know why they hurt our sense of connection? Because we look at other people's lives, we see their highlight reel, right? We see their best because we're not going to post our ugliest selfie on Instagram and Facebook. We're not going to post a real life picture. We're not going to post a picture of our family fighting on Facebook. We're going to post the picture when we're on vacation and we're posed perfectly before the Taj Mahal and we look fantastic and we look happy and we look beautiful and the setting's beautiful and everybody thinks, wow, now there's a family that's living the good life. It's not like my family. My family struggles. My family, the kids are fighting with the parents and the parents are fighting with each other and the parents are fighting over the kids. And my family is struggling. So we have this sense of shame, and social media actually enhances our shame because we're comparing our worst with others' best. And we're not measuring up. And because of that, we have a hard time embracing our vulnerability. And I want to talk about this in vulnerability because vulnerability becomes the crucial piece to get us from disconnection to connection. And vulnerability, just the word, is scary to us, not to mention the actual act of being vulnerable. Vulnerability is risky. And if we're unwilling to be vulnerable, then we cannot have genuine connection. And if you don't take anything from my talk today, write that down. If you're unwilling to be vulnerable, you can never have that true connection that you need and that you want and that will heal you. Vulnerability is the ability to take the risk of showing up as your true self in a relationship with another person. And it's so rewarding when that is honored and when that is met. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes a person isn't safe. And so that makes it difficult. But when they are, and most people, when you risk with them, they are honored that you risked yourself, your emotions, your feelings, that you risked showing up as who you are, even in your weakness, with them, that you trusted them enough. For most of us, we're honored if someone comes to us and shows that trust in us. But granted, there's a risk. And the risk is that someone might not honor that. Someone might not honor our hearts. Someone might reject us. Someone might be cruel, might make fun of our weakness. And we've had those experiences, so it makes us a little gun shy, and that's understandable. But you need to be aware that in order to find true connection, you have to find the courage to be vulnerable. And here's a quote from Brene Brown. She said, owning our story can be hard, but not nearly as difficult as spending our lives running from it. And what she's talking about here is running from our true authentic selves, trying to pretend that we are something we're not, trying to earn the respect of others, the admiration, trying to earn it by pretending we're this, we're great, we're always the best. I'll get to that more in a moment. She says, embracing our vulnerabilities is risky, but not nearly as dangerous as giving up on love and belonging and joy. The experiences that make us the most vulnerable. When you love, when you seek belonging, when you are willing to express your own joy in who you are and what you love and your passions, your interests, You're very vulnerable at those moments. And people might not agree. People might reject your thoughts, your passions, your feelings. They might make fun of you. They might make some comment. And of course, here is where social media enters again today, because we might post something, we might share something, and someone trolls us. Someone comes along and makes fun of us, or why'd you wear that dress? Or did your hair, why haven't you cut your hair? Why are you growing that beard? Your Corona beard is terrible. Whatever they might say, there is someone out there that will probably, because of their own insecurity, shame, and fear, will want to put us down. And so there's a risk. But what Brene is reminding us, that I think is very biblical, is that you have to take that risk if you want to receive the belonging and joy and love that you were designed for. Brene wrote one of her books. This is an audio book that she did with a company called Sounds True. And she titled it Rising Strong. Sounds like part of my sermon series, Rising Strong as a Spiritual Practice. And in her research on resilient people, Brene discovered that without exception, the concept of spirituality emerged from her data. She surveyed thousands of people, emerged from the data as a critical component of resilience and overcoming struggle. So people that are willing to take the risk, people that can recover from trauma or adversity or challenging times, these are people who have found spirituality. Isn't that fascinating? That came out of the data. Spirituality was directly linked to the ability to become a resilient person. And I don't think that's a coincidence, because the person who said, I am the vine and you are the branches, is the person who recognized we need connection. He created us for connection. And without it, we wither. Without it, we're weak. Without it, we're lonely. Without it, we feel marginalized. Without it, so many bad, unhealthy, negative consequences creep into who we are. Now, as I'm preaching today, I'm thinking about those who might feel, yes, Pastor, I really want more connection. I want to have more friends. I want to be part of more. But you don't understand, people have been so cruel to me. People don't genuinely like me. When I show up, people just ignore me. I'm not one of the crowd. I'm not one of the in crowd. I've always been an outsider. I've always been a loner. I've always been a nerd, a dork, a dweeb, or whatever you've been called. And I want to challenge you this morning. God has a different view of you than you may have of yourself. He believes you are a crucial part of his creation, that you're a crucial part of the family of God, the body of Christ. You're a crucial branch on the vine, and he needs you. He wants you to be connected to him. And if you are connected to him, let me tell you something about your value. Your value is that you are a child of the King. You are a prince or a princess. And you have the value that you have been looking for. And so one of the concepts that Brene brings out that comes in her research, and by the way, Brene is not a pastor, Brene is not a theologian, but so much of what comes out of her data is exactly what the Bible teaches. And one of the things she found in there is that the danger we have as humans is that we hustle for our worth. And I love her phrase on that. We hustle for our worth. And Dr. Murthy, in his interview on Brene's podcast, talked about how we live in a country that teaches children that we're as valuable as our achievements. And the most valuable people on this planet are the ones that achieve the most. and we reward those achievements. And it's not that rewarding achievements is necessarily bad, but the message we receive as young children is I'm only as valuable as I can produce, as I can achieve. And the challenge with that is you'll always find someone who's achieving more, who's producing more, who's got a higher degree or makes more money or is a higher leader or president or higher in your company or more talented or has more this or more that. And so it leaves us believing we are not enough. And so we go around hustling for our worth, and we do not have those genuine connections because our connections are based on this perception that we have to earn it. We have to earn people's love. We have to earn their respect. We have to earn these relationships. And then if we drop the ball, if we fail, or if we're not achieving, we're not producing, then we don't feel like we're worth having these connections, that people won't like us, people won't love us, people won't be our friend. And these are all subtle but powerful ways the devil destroys us. And I don't think I said that too harshly. These are powerful ways that the devil destroys us and destroys our society because it's a lie. Our value and our worth came from God. We were made in his image. We are infinitely valuable, and every person has that. And we are worthy of connection. And we have something to offer to others in connecting with them. And we have something to receive, but we have to show up for these connections. And the first thing that we have to do is we have to stop hustling for our worth and accept the worth we already have in God. Because if we're not connected to ourselves, we cannot have true connection with others. And again, if you're taking notes today, there's your sentence. Write that one down. If we are not connected to ourselves, if we do not love ourselves, if we do not accept our value from God, then we cannot have connection with others. We cannot show up as our healthy, happy selves and have a meaningful connection in our relationships with other people. And it doesn't matter if it's your spouse, it doesn't matter if it's just your friends, it doesn't matter if it's your church or being part of a collective group. We need, first and foremost, to find that connection in God. Because apart from me, Jesus said, you can do nothing. And there's many of us that are disconnected. There's many of us that get connected for a little bit, and then we find ourselves disconnected again. And so this is a spiritual practice. This is important. Did you know in John 15, Jesus says 8 times, remain, abide. The Greek word is meno. Meno means to dwell. When you go into someone's house, you meno. Meno is that verb that you dwell in a house, you dwell in a location, you dwell in a building. It means you're inside. It means you are there. And he says, abide in the vine, stay in the vine, remain in the vine. That's why the NIV says remain, because it's that concept. You're already there. Just don't leave. Don't separate. Don't run away. Don't disconnect. And it's a struggle on this earth, I think, for me and for, I'm sure, you. Sometimes the week is so busy and stressful, we just get disconnected from God. We get disconnected from ourselves. And guess what? Our relationships suffer. And then it can become a spiraling circle. And for some of us, it's been our whole lives, has been this vicious cycle. Being disconnected from ourselves, disconnected from God, disconnected from others, and then it hurts us. And so then we wall up and we put up that fear, and we don't want to be vulnerable because we've been hurt. And then we don't seek connection, and we don't get connected, and we hate ourselves, and the shame builds up, and it becomes this vicious cycle, which leaves us in a very unhealthy, withering, shriveling, dying place. And I don't want that for you. Jesus doesn't want that for you. If you're feeling desperately lonely, maybe even by Even right now, feeling lonely, though you're surrounded by your family and all these connections on social media, but you still recognize you feel lonely. Maybe it's because you're not connected to yourself. Maybe you're not allowing your true self to show up. Maybe you're disconnected from God. Maybe you don't believe that He accepts you as you are, warts and all, imperfections and all, problems and all, weakness and all. Maybe you haven't fully accepted the full, complete grace of God that just overwhelms you and says, child, I just love you because you're made in my image. And my son paid all the price for your sins. You don't have to keep carrying those. You don't have to keep carrying the shame. I can take it from you. The shame was nailed to the cross. It's not yours to carry anymore. You have to let it go. Let it go to the cross. Let his blood be given, not in vain, but for a reason, for your shame. That's what he wants. He didn't just do that for himself. He did it for you. And you have to let it go. And you have to give it to him. You have to start allowing the fear to go, the shame to go, the fear of vulnerability. You have to be willing to show up as your true self to God, as your true self to yourself, as your true self to others. And then you will start to build a positive feedback cycle. A feedback cycle where each thing becomes more positive and it grows and it builds. And I want to leave you this morning with this quote. This is from one of Brené's books called Daring Greatly. She said, courage starts with showing up and letting ourselves be seen. I don't think there's anything more courageous than that. You know, we often applaud people who do these great deeds, make these great actions, accomplish something great or daring or brave or risky, or walk a tightrope up on a skyscraper, or make a journey to Antarctica in the cold, or climb Mount Everest. And we kind of lift these people up as brave. But you know what? You can do all that out of your ego. You can do all that hustling for your worth. Do that because you want people to like and love. True courage, even higher courage, even higher bravery is when you let yourself be seen in a regular human reaction, or maybe even just with your spouse, or maybe just with your kids, or maybe just with your parents, or maybe just with a good friend. That takes a lot of guts and it takes a lot of courage. And that kind of vulnerability is exactly what Christ calls us to. That we remain in the vine so that we can be nourished, so that we can be our true selves, so that we can be fruitful. And our lives will produce fruit, and our lives will be a blessing to others. And as we have the courage to show up and be seen, guess what? We liberate those around us to also experience that love and experience the privilege of being in a safe place where they can show up and be themselves. And suddenly the world starts to change because we start to form genuine connections. And the cool thing is, just like this virus, it grows exponentially. Because as I bless my friends and my connections, they bless their friends and their connections, and suddenly it spreads like the gospel message. I think that's what happened in the early church. The early church just spread like wildfire, and people just showed up to meet every day, not because they had to, not because it was some sort of legalistic religious obligation, but because they wanted to, because they were excited about being in this community of love and acceptance and grace. The gospel is good news. The gospel goes to the core of our human loneliness, and it solves the problem at the root. And so, my prayer for you and my challenge for you today, and you need to wrestle with God. Don't let yourself off the hook with this sermon. Don't just walk away from this sermon and say, oh, it was a good sermon, really good points today. And then don't do anything about it, because I know for each one of us listening, no matter how well connected or well adjusted you are, there's still parts of you that need to be brought to Christ, that you need to accept, that you need to let go of some shame, some guilt, some unforgiveness, something that is hindering your connection first with God and then with others. And for that person who has felt like a loner, who has felt all alone, I want to speak to you. Today is your day to decide, I need to make a choice. I need to start risking. I need to start showing up in groups with friends. I need to start reaching out. And even if someone says something that kind of rubs me wrong or hurts my feelings a little bit, I need to let that go, forgive that, and continue to have the courage to just show up. Just show up, because we need you. The lie the devil is telling you is that we don't want you. We do want you, and we do need you. We need you part of the body of Christ, because just like my piece of wood that was cut for the perfect spot to hold the whole thing together, if you're not there, then the whole thing crumbles. And the whole thing is not what it was built to be and designed to be. So I pray you'll have the courage to start showing up and let yourself be seen. We need you. He needs you. And we want you. Amen.